Okay, Yves, would you like to do a self-introduction to our audience and also introduce your role at the foundation, please?
Sure. So thank you for having me on, Johan. Yes, this is the second time we do this. We did this a couple of months ago together and it went really well. So we've got another one today. My name is Yves. I'm from the EOS Network Foundation, founder and CEO. I've been in the blockchain space now for a little over 10 years, but more formally, I think full time for about 5 years now. And the first project that I really got involved with was Bitcoin back in the early days. I started off as a miner, but doing that more part-time, more as a hobby. And 5 years ago, I jumped in full-time in this space through EOS. And so I read the EOS white paper, and like many people back in 2017, 2018, I just saw the resurgence of the space with Gen 3 blockchains coming about, offering a level of scalability that we hadn't seen before with the Gen 2 blockchains. And so that's when I decided it was time to really jump in. A year and a half ago now, created the foundation. We've been alive since the end of August 2021. And basically, we're shepherds of the EOS ecosystem. We were put in place after 3.5 years or so of the mainnet running, EOS not having a foundation or having a central body essentially to help coordinate some resources and somewhat to be of a voice for the network. And in that year and a half, we've done a complete turnaround of where EOS was and where EOS is going. So I guess we'll be talking about that, other exciting initiatives today together.
Wonderful, wonderful. So I think it's very interesting to have a centralized body for a blockchain. So that's how I think the efficiency of this network is performing, and everyone knows that as well. And just for the knowledge of our audience, so EOS was launched in 2018, and the foundation was launched 2 years ago, as Yves just introduced. And EOS blockchain is a layer 1 blockchain that addresses the scalability issue. So we know one of the key trilemma in blockchain is the scalability issue. And the EOS blockchain has been widely used by developers to build like blockchains, applications, and also ecosystems. And there are a lot of use cases for EOS, like in supply chain, decentralized finance like DeFi, and also GameFi, and a lot of other use as well. And I think Yves will touch on that a bit afterwards. So several of the uniqueness of the EOS blockchain is it uses human readable accounts. So it's easier for everybody to remember, because it's so difficult to remember like meaningless account. So human readable is a big step forward. And then it also provides like affordable transaction fees and near instant finality. And also one of very special, I think a special tool is the base layer insurance with Recovery Plus. We'll cover on that as well. And then there's the EOS Network Ventures. Yeah. So we'll see a lot of questions flowing in, and then we'll be starting getting on with the Q&A section. Okay, you're ready?
Yes, I'm good to go.
Wonderful. So first question from our user, Anuru HP3. So congratulations, your question got selected. So for Yves, how would you describe delegated proof of stake model? So I think that's one of the very key mechanism for the EOS tokenomic. And so can you elaborate that in the easier understanding way to our audience, please?
Sure. So most people are comfortable with proof of stake, which is simply the amount of tokens that you hold, or the amount of stake in the network that you have gives you certain advantages, or gives you a role within the ecosystem. And with delegated proof of stake, it's very similar. You have a certain amount of stake, in this case, the EOS tokens, that you can delegate to somebody else the governance rights. And the governance rights are essentially to determine which nodes will be the validators of the network. And what that does essentially is it extracts or it separates the function or the utility of the token from a governance perspective, and then the financial value of the token. So you can still be in charge of your own token. You still are in the possession of your own token, but the votes or the node that you are signing to essentially represent that token can be delegated out to somebody. What that does in practice is very similar to proof of stake or even proof of work in a way. You select the nodes that you believe are the best to represent your interests, either because they give you financial rewards to do so. You could stake to a node, you get yield in return, and you believe that this provides value to you and to the network. Or you simply want to delegate that because you believe this particular node does actions or initiatives or it's running projects that you believe in, that you use, that are worthwhile to you. And because every token has or can, let's say, delegate to 30 different nodes, you're not limited to one. So you can either proxy that out. It's simply easier. You don't have time to do the research and you trust another entity that does that research for you. So you can proxy it out, or you can select up to 30 different manual nodes and then get rewarded from those nodes either through stake or through the other mechanisms that you see return in value.
Yeah, and then I think the best thing about that is that you're still in possession of your own tokens. Yeah, you're not giving control. Yeah, you're not giving control to other people, but still you get the rewards by voting, right?
And one of the big advantages of that, obviously, is it's less taxing on the system in terms of infrastructure, in terms of computational resource. So what that affords is then EOS to have much higher throughput, much higher performance, as you mentioned earlier, because that component, the delegated proof of stake model, basically makes it so that it's easier to run nodes in a way. There are more nodes that are capable of running, and you can have more power on the network, more throughput.
Yeah. So I think that's how like the infrastructure is built to support a more efficient and also energy efficiency wise architecture. Yeah. Wonderful. Yeah, thank you. And we'll move on to the second question. So could you highlight several of the recent achievements and then milestones that the EOS Network Foundation is recently developing or working on?
Good question. So there's a few things that come to mind. We just released the EVM, EOS's EVM on April 14th. So it's been about a month and a half now. We've been running for about 6 weeks. It's been really great opening the door. So I'll talk about EVM a little bit later, I'm sure as well. But that has been really good to open the door to other developers that have been traditionally coding on Solidity or have been coding in the EVM ecosystem. And so our EVM, quite performant. And same thing, what you mentioned earlier, low gas cost, very reliable, performant. And so we've opened that up 6 weeks ago. And we've seen some tremendous, inflow of new developers, new applications. And we can touch upon that a little bit later, but that's been really good. Outside of that, EVM. So did release 6 weeks ago, the first version on mainnet, and we've already done an upgrade. And that came out yesterday, but essentially the release is today. And we'll touch upon that a little bit later as well, but it provides new functionality to the EVM, in particular Yield Plus integration, which is an interesting DeFi initiative and essentially financial reward initiative. We also have the roadmap to the EVM, which will be released shortly, and that'll give the users a sense of where we're going with this EVM, which functions we're going to add to it within the next, let's say, 6 to 12 months, so that people can see what it is we're integrating, how we're catching up to some of the EIPs that are already out, and which components we're actually taking the lead on in terms of EIPs, and where we want to materially impact that space as well, so the EVM space. Because there's some really interesting work being done, and now EOS will be able to contribute to that work within that world. Outside of this, I've been working closely with Hong Kong. Hong Kong is, tomorrow, the official date, June 1st. There's some things that are officially, opening. So I've been working with Hong Kong. I'm heading there in a few weeks again. I've actually applied for residency in Hong Kong. So more time there. We already have an office. We already have staff. But then for more for EOS reasons and just to expand in that market, because we believe it is an important market, I've even applied for residency there, essentially be able to work there, so I can spend even more time there. There's a regulatory body that we've been working with as well to be able to open up EOS to a new market that has traditionally not been open to EOS in terms of retail and institutions. So that's already that's also under the works, and it's ideally coming out in the next month or two. So that's kind of something special. And the last thing I'll mention is a legal update. When the foundation was created, one of the first mandates that we got from the EOS token holders was to bring the previous, I guess, shepherd in a way to account, and that is being Block One. And that was one of the first files, one of the first tags that we got. And so there's been movement on that front. I just released a letter last week that kind of gave an update on where we are with that file and how users can get involved. And so what I would encourage everybody listening in, I don't know how many people are here right now, but I would
have 6,000.
6,000, excellent. We're currently accumulating names for a class action against Block One. So Block One right now, there is another class action that is underway with them, but that's limited scope and it's in a particular jurisdiction. What the ENF can do at this stage, where we are with this process internally that we were given as a mandate, is there's another class action that is available that we're focused on and that will help support and amplify in the community. And so if you're listening in right now and you've been impacted by the commitments and the promises made by Block One leading up to about September 2021, so far after the ICO, if you entered into this ecosystem because of those representations that they made, and that you believe that you're at a loss because your token essentially has less utility than what it would have had if Block One had lived up to the commitments of deploying $1 billion worth of capital back in the ecosystem, please send an email to legal@eosnetwork.com. And we're exploring what that looks like in terms of a class. And there's already been hundreds of people that have signed in. So we would like others. The more people there are, the better. We're going to hold Block One to account for those failed promises.
Got it. And thank you so much for the introducing the recent updates. So I think, so you mentioned that tomorrow will be June 1st and that there's a big regulatory movement, a progress in Hong Kong. So I think a lot of people in the crypto space are aware of that. And also, I think a good follow-up question is that we will have this from Katie. Katie, you're listening right now. So Katie is also aware of the launch of the EOS and EVM that started yesterday, right? So would you like to elaborate a bit more on what the key changes after the launch?
So EOS EVM launched 6 weeks ago, formerly on the mainnet. We just upgraded another upgrade yesterday. So just to clarify that. And what has changed really is that EVM essentially is a window. It's a door that you're opening, or a window that you're opening to a whole new ecosystem. And what was important for us when launching EVM was to make sure that our EVM was full RPC compatible. What that means in layman's terms is that for a developer that's been building on Ethereum or that's been building on a EVM compatible chain, the amount of work that is required on their end to be able to deploy the same smart contract and the same application onto EOS is essentially minimal. Maybe I'm oversimplifying a little bit, but think about you just need to double click. It's as easy as that with that full RPC compatibility. And so what's changed for us is an inflow of new developers and new applications that now have access to the EOS ecosystem, either it be the community, the liquidity that is in the EOS, the talent, the developer talent that is here, and or just the libraries and the other, native EOS functions that are not found on EVM compatible chains. So think of the EVM someone as a super SDK. It's a portal that abstracts away a lot of the difficult components of dealing with blockchain because there's so many libraries, there's so much work that's been done on that front. But what EOS then provides into this as you come into EVM, think of the EOS as the engine. So if this is a car, the door that you're entering, the chassis of the car now is much easier through EVM if you've been in that world, but you get access to the EOS engine in the background that's been running for 5 years, that's ultra performant, extremely low cost, very reliable. And so you get access to the best of both worlds in a way. And that's really what's changed since the launch of the EVM. Is we've seen new applications come in. Within the first 3 weeks, I think we had 12 new applications, DeFi, GameFi, become more foundational components at the stage, DEX, swap, that type of thing. And what we've seen in other ecosystems is expanding that EVM definitely just opens the door to what we see are applications that are not chain specific. They want to open up and be interoperable with as many chains as possible, as many communities as possible. And that's really what the EVM provides. And we've seen the same thing on our end.
Yeah, because I think for blockchain, one of the bottlenecks that if you want to cross-chain or build something like on a bigger platform, then you need to get familiar with all like a total different logic. So these EOS EVM can actually let developers painlessly bridge to bridge to the EOS ecosystem and enjoy the SDK and also all the resources that you just mentioned, right?
Yeah, exactly. And then it's all at a very low cost. So the barrier to entry is extremely low. So for a project that's already been running, they already have code, they already have everything audited, maybe they already have a community and such. To come over and leverage another EVM, the cost of doing so is extremely low. And so the return on investment in a way can be, the ratio can be very high. And so we've seen that because it's so easy, more users, more developers are going through that route in a very short period of time. So it's very exciting for us.
Yeah, so if you're developers, this is very key information. Then you can go to the EOS website to check out more information how you can possibly deploy that and utilizing those resources too.
And I'll talk about like other funding mechanisms from this and how tokenomics have also changed because of this. Maybe later on as people ask a question. So
that's a very good bridge. So we do have a question over here about tokenomics.
This is not planned, I swear.
So at Debate 2023, thank you for this perfect question. Good timing. Here you go, Yves.
All right, then this is a really good transition. I swear this wasn't planned. I figured I'd talk about it again, but not immediately right afterwards. Token economics of the network. So let's continue down the EVM path. The way that we've built the EVM is it's a public funded, let's say, initiative on the EOS network. And so it's the ENF, the EOS Network Foundation, that runs the RPC nodes and that provides that service, that's developed the code, that open sourced it, auditing, etc. So everything is from the network, in a way, from the foundation. And one of the things that we wanted to do was ensure that we've had a few pivots along the way, but what we ended up with is the underlying gas token, the underlying token that's used when using the EVM, that's abstracted away from users, is EOS. What that does is it leverages the utility of the EOS token. It pays for the gas in the background. It pays for the network resources, essentially. And the way that we've built that in terms of tokenomics is the more the EVM is used, the more EOS we lock up in a contract. And the idea with those EOS, think of them as being burned, or they will either formally be burned or they're locked up. In the meantime, they're currently locked up as we gather data and see what would be the best burn mechanism in terms of frequency or how to do so, even in terms of marketing in a way. But essentially, the tokenomics remain the same, regardless of the process that'll be used. The idea is the more the EVM is used, the more EOS is taken out of circulation, and the more deflationary on the token there is. And we've already seen that within a short period of time. Through the EVM, the EOS network was accumulating roughly the same amount of EOS tokens locked as the other mechanisms that we have on the network, which also lock up tokens, which is called REX. And so REX, our resource exchange, takes some of the network functions, for gas, for example, for the usage of the network, for purchasing RAM, for purchasing premium names. It then redistributes the tokens accumulated from the network as a benefit, as yield to the token holders. In the EVM case, it's the opposite. It burns those tokens. So one of them is a benefit to all token holders, and the other one is a benefit to the token holders that are staking. And so it's very different processes. Ultimately, what both of them do, though, is ensure that the token has really good alignment of incentives for the end users. So the more the network gets used, the more people either get rewarded directly or the more tokens are taken out of circulation. Within a very short period of time, we've seen that we're taking a lot of tokens out of circulation within a very, very short period of time. And so what we expect with this is, as the utility of the EVM grows, the more tokens will be taken out of circulation, which means inherently the tokens that are left over that are not being used inherently have a little bit more value.
Got it. So it's like so in a way, either the token get more valuable, or in the REX scenario, there is more emission, or the token
it's
gets
like a redistribution in the rest sense. So so if you do particular actions on the network, or if you use the token for its utility, you get some of that back in a way if you're staking. I'm oversimplifying, but those who do get rewarded, and so you dilute yourself less by getting some back.
Yeah.
And the other way, it's a complete burn. So very similar to the BNB token, where over a period of time, there's just less of tokens out there. So it also gives your particular token more utility because there's less of them out there.
Yeah, so I think this will be a very important information for users, because as long as they hold EOS with this mechanism, it will get more valuable over time because of this mechanism. Okay, let's move on to the next question. So is there some example that you can share with us about successful dApps that's built on EOS? So some use cases to our users, please.
Sure. So kind of continuing down the vein what we were talking about before with the tokenomics, there's one initiative that's not necessarily a dApp, but it leads into a dApp. That's why I'll mention it. So I talked about Rex and how you can lock up your tokens and get some yield from there. But there's an initiative specifically created for yield called Yield Plus. What the network does is, through the foundation, it allocates a certain amount of tokens that go out on a daily basis to users that are staking in particular applications. Those applications need to meet certain requirements. Just to kind of highlight very briefly, they're DeFi protocols. They need to have a certain amount of TVL locked, and they need to have an audit in place, and they need to join Recover Plus, which you mentioned earlier. And if they meet those base requirements, then they're eligible to get the subsidies from Yield Plus. So the amount of tokens that are being released every day at the network level, so that they can be redistributed to token holders who are participating in these protocols. The main application that is a beneficiary of the Yield Plus, because they've got a lot of TVL, they've got a lot of different protocols, is called DeFi Box. And so DeFi Box has multiple different protocols under it, so a vault, a swap, that type of thing. And basically, users, EOS token holders who are leveraging those products, either by securing their tokens, they get a steady stream of yield, in part that comes from the network directly. So it's very stable, it's very predictable, and the base is quite high. So it adds about a 5% yield to the base, let's say, token, as well as then being complemented by whatever that application provides. So think of the network doing a B2B with DeFi Box in this case through Yield Plus initiative. And then DeFi Box, which is the application level, they do the B2C with the client. And so the network provides up to 5% directly to, and then the application complements with, obviously, if their application is being used more, they're generating fees. They're also running a block producer on the network, so they're generating income there. Everything gets redistributed back to the token holders. And what that gives is between a 6 to 8% yield on your token. And I would say that that's one of the most successful base level, I guess, dApps in a way, because it keeps your tokens liquid to a certain extent while getting rewarded from API on the network. More on a different front in terms of utility, we've got Upland, which is a game, a metaverse game now that's been running for a few years. They've consistently been in the top 5 and top 10 daily active users game in all of blockchain.
Wow.
So it's a massive game. And basically no gas fees, accounts are abstracted away. Users don't even know that they're running on blockchain.
Really?
And that's one of and this occurred really, really early on. They've abstracted away all of the blockchain components because users can create an account using WebAuthn type of login. And in the background, it does create an EOS account. You are leveraging the blockchain. But for a lot of non-blockchain natives, because it's abstracted away, you can download this in the Play Store and the iStore. Then you're just playing a game. You're just playing a fun game. There's in-game tokenomics, in-game financial incentives, all running on EOS. And that's only possible because EOS has extremely high throughput, very high reliability, and low cost. And so the merger there, plus the software, the underlying software that EOS is built on, so the software stack is extremely easy to use, or extremely powerful, I should say, not the right word, but is very familiar to users because it's built on C++. And another application that I'll mention is WordProof. So WordProof is a timestamp I guess it creates online content trust by timestamping that Web2 content onto the blockchain.
Oh,
So
okay.
think of any article that people publish, and you want to make sure that that article won't change, or that the facts have been checked, and that the author is really the author. By timestamping that to the blockchain through simple plugins like Yoast SEO, which is, I believe, the number one plugin that WordProof was built around, you get, again, this idea that a lot of people are leveraging the blockchain without even knowing it. And it's all built on EOS, and it's all running in the background. That creates a lot of usage and demand on chain, which then further gives more utility to the token, which then again increases the value of the token itself, because it really is a utility token.
Yeah, I think this is very important because so nowadays we use a lot of like digital signs and stuff. So it will be very crucial and important to ensure that the document and the author or the signers they are actually the authentic person, and the document the authenticity of that.
And recently, WordProof even just integrated Shopify. So Shopify, for people who don't know, is kind of an e-commerce platform that during COVID obviously took the world by storm. You can set up an e-commerce shop very, very quickly. So now within Shopify, again, very simple toggle, you're able to timestamp onto the EOS blockchain your content. And so it just makes it very, very easy for people that are not even aware or that have no idea how to use blockchain to essentially leverage the functionalities of blockchain, give the utility or that inherent functionality back into the hands of the developers and the end users.
Yeah, so I think one of the issue that it tries to try to solve is the trustability problem as well, because on e-commerce, people don't know where the goods are coming from. The traceability is a bit difficult in the Web2 world, but with blockchain technology, it's easier now. And also the GameFi project that you just mentioned, I think it's quite interesting because sometimes they need to, the projects, they need to have a lower entertainment, but as the one you mentioned, it seems pretty interesting. And then users don't even aware that they are using blockchain when they are having a lot of fun as well.
Yeah, Upland is like a mix between the metaverse and Monopoly. So you're buying real estate in the metaverse of real cities. So they open up a city once in a while, real cities in the world. So let's say they opened up Rio or they opened up London. In the metaverse, it looks exactly like that city, and you're buying plots of land, like if you're playing Monopoly, and then those plots of land increase in value, and then you can trade them, you can rent your properties, etc. So it's a really fun game that's a mix of the metaverse and Monopoly. And like I said, it's constantly in tops of daily active users. It's constantly in the top 5, top 10. And it's only possible because of EOS. And there are more games like this now coming on because of the EVM as well. And so EVM abstracting away a lot of the inherent, I guess, blockchain difficulties. We're seeing more and more of that come through because of the EVM as well.
Yeah, so for our audience, if you haven't tried it out, you can look it up online and see if you want to go for a Web3 version of the Monopoly. And it has a reflective value, reflected scenario to the real world as well.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and then let's move on to the next question. So Sharif would like to know how does EOS Network handle like upgrades and protocol changes while maintaining the stability? Because I think this is also very important issue.
Yeah, that's a really good question. It's one of the inherent properties of EOS when it was announced years ago, almost 5 years ago now, or 5 years ago now, was that this idea that the network not only has to scale and has to be able to accommodate a large subset of users and utility, essentially, in order for it to somewhat reach mass adoption, but that also it needed to abstract away the upgrade component. So when we think of hard forks in the blockchain space, sometimes it's very stressful for people to imagine, what will I need to do if there's a hard fork? Do I go left or do I go right? Do I choose the legacy chain or the newly updated chain? And EOS, in terms of a tech stack, wanted to somewhat remove that from consideration. And so EOS has on multiple occasions now upgraded in a soft fork fashion. What I mean by soft fork is that the node operators and the nodes accessing the network can upgrade at their own pace. And so there's a new patch that comes out. It brings about new features. You don't need to upgrade if you don't want to. You can run testing on your own, upgrade when you're ready. We've done this on multiple occasions over the years. What we've also done, though, is the typical hard fork scenario that people envision, which is everybody needs to upgrade because the network itself gets a full-on upgrade. The beauty with EOS and how it handles upgrade is that the user is never aware of any of this. They never have to make any choice between token A or token B, legacy token or new token, or which network they'll connect to. EOS has done this on multiple occasions. Our last hard fork was September last year, and we're planning another one in September, October this year. And so all the coordination efforts to be able to do this are quite massive, but because EOS has done this multiple times, it's got a system in place. The end user essentially sees no disruption, no difference on their end. Everybody on the network, everybody who's providing infrastructure upgrades, runs the new code. There's a testing process, there's a deployment process, etc. But then everybody upgrades at the same time. And the end user, nothing changes. There's no downtime. EOS has been running now for, I think it's over 1,800 days straight, literally zero downtime. From the very beginning of the mainnet launch. It's extremely reliable. And that was one of the functions, building EOS in that way so that the end user doesn't even know that anything is happening. It's not easy. The code is obviously extremely powerful, and the coordination efforts to be able to do this are quite massive. But this is an inherent function of EOS. And so the network validators, the developers, basically the different stakeholders that are relevant in this process have this down now. This is something that we do regularly.
Yeah, that's remarkable.
But it is a function. It's definitely not easy. It's just abstracted away from the user.
Yeah, was it designed that way from the very beginning, that you try to prevent like disturbance for developers and also the application as well?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's been the original design, and that's what we've been continuing down the path of as well. One of our mottos within the ENF anyways is EOS blockchain made easy. This idea that, and through the EVM, this is what we're doing with other initiatives that we're working on. We want to abstract away the blockchain component from the users so that users who want to get into the nitty gritty of the blockchain and want to be able to change every knob and really go in deep, they can do so. And the users that simply want to leverage maybe the inherent financial benefits of blockchain, but that don't want to deal with the rest of the blockchain things, they can do so as well. So we've abstracted away the private keys, as you mentioned, with readable names. We've also, but if you want keys, that's also possible. Names, that's possible. And so we've got kind of the full spectrum here. This is how we believe that we're well positioned for mass adoption and for the inevitable, what we believe will be the mass adoption of blockchain. In large part, end users, the majority of them, don't need to know how this works. They don't really care how this works. They're here for a very particular reason. And if we can abstract that away from them to the level that is of their comfort, whether they be developers or a token holder, whoever they are, if we give them that flexibility, it makes it much easier for people to onboard on to this technology.
Yeah, so I think this is actually a very good structure because no matter you are developers or you are the end users, you can enjoy the efficiency and the stability of this network. Okay. Hey, so moving on to the next question. So we've heard about ENV, and then our users would like to know what is ENV exactly and why ENV launched as a independent entity, and also what is the structure and the model of it.
So the foundation that we've been talking about is a non-for-profit. And so this is what I'm the CEO and founder of. When the foundation came about, one of the things that it was attempting to address in the ecosystem was the lack of centralization, the lack of coordination within the network, but in a very decentralized, accountable way. And this is what we've created with the foundation. And that's on the non-for-profit side of things. And so we have various funding mechanisms for the different types of stakeholders in the network, but everything is on the nonprofit side. And so there's a big focus on co-development, open source, public goods, that type of thing. One of the things that is important in a network as well, though, is to have the other side of the coin, which is the for-profit, the more venture side of things. And this is what ENV is. So it's EOS Network Ventures. It's this idea that after you've gone through the for-profit side, the non-for-profit, side of things, you might need more or you might want more financial support. You might want to now trade equity in order to receive funding. But then at this level, at some point, the amount of funding that you need really is no longer suitable for a non-for-profit side of things. So now the network says, great, we've got funding available, we've got mechanisms available. As you somewhat, in a way, graduate and as you get bigger and you need more support from the network or more incubation capabilities from the network. And so ENV is our response to that. We recently announced back at the end of last year a treasury that we created for this. The network reached consensus on allocating a certain amount of tokens for this. So it's a little over 68 million tokens. And then alongside other partners basically coming and complementing that funding, the idea is to create, or what we created was roughly $100 million fund. Obviously, it fluctuates the value of tokens over time. And then recently, what we've done with that fund is we've created the first fund from within that treasury, Fund 1, which is currently funded with $20 million worth of EOS tokens, so a little over 22.7 million tokens. And the idea with this is that it's an independent body. It's completely separate from the ENF. And its focus is really to make investments and generate a return, generate yield for the limited partners, essentially the LPs within that. And the network being the main LP in a way, the idea is that the network would be able to benefit from those returns in various forms as those returns come back within the years, within the term of the investments. That would come in again offset the inflationary pressures or the token issuance that happens on the non-for-profit side of things. And so going back to this idea of tokenomics, everything we do within EOS, we try to balance it so that there's a steady flow of, I guess, investments in the network while also removing tokens from circulation and ensuring that the downward pressure on the token holders is either minimized and or completely removed, where again, the idea is EOS would be completely deflationary in terms of token flow.
And is there a board deciding which projects I will invest it into, and how does that mechanism actually, what's the key pillars that's more important when we're making that decision?
Yeah, so the ENV is built as a standard VC essentially, and so it reviews projects in a very standard way. Obviously, its mandate though is around the EOS ecosystem. So think of the first fund as an EOS ecosystem fund. It's been reviewing projects. This is all recently launched, and so the mechanism is still quite manual at this stage. But the idea is that it reviews projects with the general partners and with the people that are relevant within that process, and then makes investments in those projects. The fund itself, I can break it down a little bit. It's a $20 million fund. And this is only the first fund, but it's got a primary market component, a secondary market component, and a strategic investment component. And the idea is it makes larger ticket investments and also incubates projects either that are already in the EOS ecosystem or that are coming to the EOS ecosystem. And then it's got smaller ticket items where it's less of an incubation, more of financial support, a little bit less equity, maybe a little bit more tickets in that sense. But it's very traditional, very VC oriented. The big focus though is everything is on the EOS ecosystem. And the way that it's structured, it enables for the first time outside investments to be able to be made into the ecosystem. Now the rails are essentially set up. And the first one that we announced in terms of a partner is DWF. So they've set aside $15 million for basically EOS ecosystem fund that'll come through those different funds that the ENV is launching, so that we can have external capital coming into the ecosystem specific for EOS applications that isn't actually coming from either token inflation or the current tokenomics. Those rails have been set up, and we're working with other strategic partners to keep doing that as well. Prior to the ENV being set up, we didn't have that capability. We wanted to invest in the ecosystem. The only thing you could do was do your own research and go and invest in a particular project yourself, which is quite difficult for outside investors, or basically buy the EOS token, which is really nice. But now the capital that you're injecting isn't going to a particular type of project or anything. You're just buying into the network. And so this creates that rail of being able to have outside capital that to leverage, let's say, the knowledge that the ENV can provide in terms of deal flow and who to invest in and who are the good projects, etc. and then investing in that for return directly. And the dividends then get split out by the LPs. And the network being an LP, it will also get its share of dividends as well.
Yeah, so you're being like a gatekeeper and also helping the ecosystem, the EOS ecosystem to flourish and cultivate the projects within the ecosystem.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so the next question, I think this is people, a lot of our audience might be interested into this one. We've touched on Recovery Plus, and would you like to elaborate a bit more on this one and also how helpful it can be for DeFi projects as well?
Sure. This is a really big initiative of ours. Yes. We noticed, or it's not that we noticed, everybody notices that blockchain is still inherently very difficult. It's still quite new. It's still very nascent as a field. And so it's just a question of time till you hear of a new hack or there's something else that goes wrong with smart contracts. And it's not necessarily the smart contract itself goes wrong, is that sometimes there's an exploit that either within the code itself, or it's a combination of different smart contracts that now interact with one another that create this exploit opportunity. And so we've seen over the years that there's not a week that goes by that there's not a new hack. There's not something else that happens. And it has happened on EOS on 2 occasions, not with EOS itself, but because EOS is a permissionless layer 1, then obviously people deploy their smart contract, deploy their applications. And we've seen that some of those applications have been vulnerable and they've been hacks. And so EOS inherently has a permission system that enables it to be able to potentially intervene when something happens. And there were 2 particular instances within the past that the block producers on EOS decided, actually there's more than 2, but the block producers decided to intervene. They decided that they had enough information in place and the capacity, the skill set, and the time. This is extremely difficult. When a hack occurs, you're quite limited in what you can do and how long you have and the information you have. But in these occasions, the network validators had what they needed to be able to step in. And what we wanted to do as an initiative is ensure that it's not a question of will it happen again, it's when it's going to happen again. There's going to be another event that we can ahead of time create a program that would give as much information as possible so that should something happen, the network and through the validators is in a position quicker to be able to determine whether it wants to intervene, whether or not it can. That's a different question. But if it can, whether or not it wants to. And so Recover Plus was created as an initiative leveraging the few occasions that it happened in the past. In those occasions, what happened? What did we need? What were we missing? What could we do better to ensure at the end of the day, this program is all about the safety and security of the token holders. We want to ensure that if something happens, because it's a question of when, that we increase the likelihood that your funds are recovered, that your funds are safe. And this is really what Recover Plus is. It's guidelines, procedures around what can people do in advance. So they need to provide, this is a B2B initiative. So an application would submit, meet the thresholds of what is required. A big part of this is KYC, KYB. Do they have an audit? Are they open sourced? What is that? Where's the repo for that particular application? What's their user base? What is, basically all of the information as much as possible so that if something happens, we already have that information, and then the network can make a determination as to whether or not it wants to step in and essentially either lock funds and stop the outflow of funds because there's an ongoing hack and the tokens are trying to exit the ecosystem. In large part, Binance is even part of Recover Plus in a way, because one of the first things that you do is you call the exchanges and you say, by the way, there's an ongoing hack. If it comes through these doors, essentially, just know that, be ready. And so it's even just doing that part of something is ongoing, being able to alert the relevant third parties. There's a big component of that as well. So how does it help DeFi? It doesn't remove the likelihood that there are going to be hacks. It doesn't ensure that the tokens will be saved. It attempts to increase the likelihood that something can be done and that funds can be recovered. And we've already seen it in action on a few occasions where there are essentially no losses to token holders or very minimal loss, either because there was a ransom and maybe the ransom was essentially the loss. but token holders have been made whole on multiple occasions. So there's a hack of more than $2 million. 100% of token holders were made whole. There was another one a little over, I believe it's $20 million at the time. All the token holders were made whole. And so it increases the likelihood of that happening with a formal process.
Yeah, so it's like a SOP when there's an emergency happens, how people should react to that.
Very complex SOP, yes.
And prevent it beforehand.
It's kind of like an insurance layer where as much as possible, you're opting in. So these applications opt in. This is all opt-in. Token holders know that if they're interacting with this application that's opted into that program, the likelihood is a little bit lower, or the likelihood of something happening is likely the same. The chances that they can be made whole are higher is the idea, right? So it's kind of like an insurance program.
Yeah, and is it extended to the EOS EVM as well?
That's a really good question. It is not currently. And so the two initiatives that we mentioned earlier, Yield Plus and Recover Plus, which interact with one another very well. Yield Plus availability, or I guess functionality within the EVM was just released today within that latest EVM update. And so this will now be possible there, which will then also extend EVM recovery to Recover Plus. It's not there at this stage. We do need to do essentially more code upgrades to be able to extend that program, but that is in the roadmap. Again, one of the bigger things for us is we want to, I mentioned it earlier, EOS is blockchain made easy. We believe that at some point there's going to be a massive influx of users that will start wanting to interact with blockchain or see the benefits of blockchain. We're already seeing that trend happen. And we want to have the foundational layers in there to protect users. And we want to make it easy on users. The majority of users, we want to abstract all of the difficulty that we've learned over the years away from them. So this is a big focus of ours is essentially user onboarding, user experience, so that all of the difficult things or the unpleasant things about blockchain, as much as possible, are removed from the equation for them.
Yeah, so I think it will be pretty powerful if that's enabled and extended to the EOS EVM as well.
It's in the roadmap. It's on the way.
Yeah, we'll look out and pay attention to your announcements in the future. Okay, we'll move on to the next question about governance. So is there any, you've mentioned Hong Kong, and is there other collaboration with government entities or regulatory bodies? Because regulation is currently a hot topic in crypto world as well. Would you like to touch a bit on that?
Yeah, so I mentioned Hong Kong. I'm heading there again in about 3 weeks. That's a really hot space for us. Asia in general is a really important hub for blockchain as a whole. And in the last couple of years, Asia was in a way closed to blockchain in large part because of mainland China and the policies there. And so we're extremely bullish with Hong Kong reopening officially, I guess, as of tomorrow, but they've been slowly opening. So I've been there a few weeks back. We met with government bodies and regulatory agencies there. We're continuing down that work. As I mentioned earlier, I'm even in the process of obtaining residency there, so that I can spend even more time there. We already have an office. We already have staff. And so continuing that front, really, really important for us. We're also in working with other government bodies, and I won't share which ones, but there's something special that we're working on that ideally will be released in the next month or so, where it's going to open up EOS to a complete new market that's never been made available before to retail and to institutions. And so that's a huge one that we're working with the government there. Last year, we also worked with the South Korean government. So South Korea is a very important place for EOS token holders, and we worked with the city of Busan to create the VCAPP, Venture Capital Alliance Blockchain of Busan. So working with them there to try and expand that even further. We see that in general in this space, the regulations can impact operations quite significantly, and very rapidly things can change. And so it's important for us to ensure that we, in a way, have what I call regulatory arbitrage, where some doors will shut or some things will be harder and it's completely outside of our control, while other doors open. And you want to be one of the first to enter into those doors to make sure that you're well positioned there. And the the two areas that I just mentioned are really important for us. There are other areas around the world that we're exploring, and like I said, there's one in particular that I think will be announced in a month, and I'm really excited about that. But this idea of collaborating with governments, especially governments that are either on a path to creating policies that essentially secure end users in place, but also create a framework around how to operate a business within the blockchain space within that particular jurisdiction. So that's an approach that we really like, is the administrative clarity, or governments that choose, we don't have a framework yet, but we're also letting innovations take its course. So we know we're going to put regulations in. We know we're going to create a framework, but in the meantime, it's open. We're not going to come back and close the door. And so even though what you're currently doing and how you're doing it might change in the future, we're not going to go back and essentially shut down. And so those two types of jurisdictions, I think, are really important for the space as a whole, as we want to reach more and more mass adoption. And we're seeing that happen. And you're seeing kind of that flow of where those jurisdictions come about. And we're at the forefront. We're trying to be there every step along the way.
Yeah, so I guess we'll see EOS in a lot of jurisdictions in the future very soon. And yeah, I think that connects to my next question. So we also get this from Sandichi. So I would like to extend the previous questions to like local community, because you mentioned that there EOS is extending to other countries. So is there any plan or any promotion that you are going to connect with local communities as well?
Yes. So we've got, the foundation was essentially born out of the community. The foundation, after having been starved for years of funding and of essentially coordinated support, the foundation came about. This is some of it. It's raison d'être, or what led to the creation of. And so, kind of a drop again. If you weren't listening earlier, there's a history of EOS, and if you believe you've been impacted by that history and you'd like to join a class action against the entity called Block One that kind of led you down this path, please send an email to legal@eosnetwork.com. But this idea of community, and where EOS was born out of, and community as its strength, is really inherent to EOS. And so we have multiple community initiatives where we interact with our token holders, with our stakeholders on a regular basis. For example, every Wednesday Eastern time, we hold a fireside chat. It's an AMA just like this, but within the EOS community, completely open. We've got a bunch of different developers that join in. We regularly get between 60 to 100 different participants live. It's streaming on Twitter, it's in Discord, it's on YouTube, and basically it's a free-for-all. People come talk about their projects, people come and ask questions to the foundation. Everything is open book. And so we've been doing this now for well over a year and a half or so on a weekly basis. Outside of that, we also have initiatives, for example, like on our website. We just recently launched about 2 weeks ago a portal where you can submit your project, very simple form. You submit your project, and we're able to see how we can help from a marketing perspective, and how we can amplify what you're doing, whether it be inviting you on the initiatives that we have, like the fireside chat, whether or not you can be eligible for some funding mechanisms that we have, either through Pomelo, which is a Gitcoin equivalent, which is quadratic funding, or the grant framework that we have as well. With even within that Pomelo that I just mentioned, essentially it's the community of token holders that determine where the funds go. So in Pomelo, the network itself is a matching partner. It gives what I call, I guess, indirect funding. We make funds available, but we don't determine, the foundation doesn't determine where those funds essentially go. The token holders that participate in Pomelo, they give donations to a project, and the network matches it. So people donate to a particular project, and it incentivizes small donations from multiple people through quadratic funding, which Vitalik wrote a paper on. Essentially, it lets the community decide where the fund goes. So we've got indirect mechanisms like this, and then we've got the grant framework, which is a direct funding mechanism, where people apply for funding to the foundation, grants to the level of between 10K to 200K or so, for particular pieces of open source software that end up being building blocks for the rest of the community. So we've got that. We've got, like I said, the marketing front, the more AMA style front. So we've got many different ways to interact with the community. And there's a new one that we're currently working on, which is more of an ambassador program type of thing, which is still yet unreleased, but we're working on something where now we'll be able to have a different level of interaction with token holders and or stakeholders that want to participate in a different, more grassroots kind of way.
Yeah, so I think there's a lot of community engagement. So for our audience, if you are holding EOS tokens, or if you are interested in contributing to the EOS ecosystem, you can check out on their website. So I can't believe it. We are already reaching the 1 hour mark already. I feel like only 10 minutes flies.
It goes by pretty quickly, yes.
Yeah.
I tend to talk a lot as well, so feel free to interrupt me or to ask subsequent questions if you want more clarification.
Yeah, it's very informative. And then you share a lot of information from like the foundation-wise and also from the technical perspective, and also like how a general audience can contribute to the network as well. A lot of information for our audiences. Thank you. And I think we've covered a lot for today's AMA. And Yves, would you like to have some last comments before we wrap it up?
Sure. So, I mean, everybody knows that EOS has been around now for quite some time. It was one of the first layer 3 Gen 1 blockchains that came about 2017, 2018. There's been an incredible resurgence of developers coming onto the network, of stakeholders coming back in as they see this very powerful story that transpired within the EOS community, as EOS really represents or exemplifies what Web3 is all about, which is token holders and the community taking the power back, essentially, being able to be in charge of their own destiny, leveraging the blockchain properties. And so what we've seen in EOS in the last year and a half, with the creation of the foundation and just kind of this turnaround story, if that speaks to you, if you want to be part of that, if you ever were attracted to EOS in the first place because you saw that EOS could fill a particular role within the blockchain ecosystem, EOS is back. EOS is extremely vibrant. There's a really vibrant community. There are a lot of funding opportunities available. There's a lot of growth opportunities available. EOS essentially at this point represents somewhat an undervalued project. And so if you're willing to come and join this ecosystem, I think people will be very happy with what has happened and kind of that underlying reliability, right? So there's very few networks that have been up and running for 5 years like this that have seen more than 100 million transactions per day, more than all of blockchain combined for months on end. The software stack is extremely, extremely powerful. And what we've now paired it with the foundation, with ENV, it really opens, and with the EVM, it really opens the doors and closes a lot of the gaps that were created over the last couple of years. And EOS is on its way up, definitely. So come and join us.
Thank you. Thank you again, Yves, and we hope to have you again pretty soon. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Johan, for having me on. Take care, everybody.
Take care. Bye.